We are live, back, life in the fast lane, NASCAR style, and we're going to handicap this weekend, Labor Day weekend's big race in Darlington, the first of the playoffs. The playoffs are set. Going to recap Daytona, the craziness of Daytona from last week, and more importantly, we're going to look at Darlington for this Sunday night, 6 p.m. Eastern. Rocky's home track. I've got his cooler packed. He's ready to go. Cooler is packed, snacks and all, for the Cookout Southern 500. We're going to see if we can fit Andy Lang in there as well, sneak him into the track. But, hey, before we get to Rocky's home track, let's do the Rocky recap. I'm, of course, joined by Andy Lang, WagerTalk.com. I'm Steve Merrill, WagerTalk.com. And that is Rocky Atkinson, SportsMemo.com. And, Rocky, I know you're chomping at the bit to get to the Darlington race, but let's recap Daytona. It was the final track before the playoffs. We almost had another first-time winner sneak his way in, but that's not how it finished overall. As always, what's the Rocky recap for Daytona?
Yeah, well, another crazy race in Daytona, and it certainly added to the excitement of the final regular season race for sure. Couple big ones again. Ryan Blaney ends up winning the race. Chris Buescher finished second, but he was later disqualified due to a rules violation. So that gave the official second place finish to Bubba Wallace. And if you remember last week, we talked about Bubba and we said, normally we're talking about fading Bubba. We told everybody do not fade Bubba this week. And he ended up finishing second in the race. Very strong run. His best finish leaving the Cup Series. Ryan Newman finished third. Ryan Preece finished fourth. Tyler Reddick rounded out the top five. Justin Haley finished sixth. Alex Bowman seventh. Chase Elliott was eighth. And a couple of no-name guys, B.J. McLeod in ninth. Josh Bilicki finished in the 10th spot. Just a lot of drivers that normally don't finish strong. After half the field was taken out by a couple of big crashes, end up in the top 10. Stage 1 was won by Chase Elliott. Stage 2 by Joey Logano. We move on to the playoffs now. We'll talk a little bit about that. Kyle Larson takes home the regular season championship. Playoffs are now set. We have Larson in the first position, Ryan Blaney, Martin Truex Jr., Kyle Busch, Chase Elliott, Alex Bowman, Denny Hamlin, William Byron, Joey Logano, Brad Keselowski, Kurt Busch, Christopher Bell, Michael McDowell, Eric Almirola, Tyler Reddick, and Kevin Harvick are the top 16 in the playoffs there. Do want to make note, Kevin Harvick has his work cut out for him as he starts the playoffs 50 points behind Larson in that 16th spot. So looking to see if he can turn his season around somewhat.
And once again, Hamlin and Harvick both have not won yet. Next three races, of course, those of you new to NASCAR, it's a 10-race playoff. They do them in sets of three. Then they drop four drivers. The next set of three, they drop four. The next set of three, and then by the final race on November 7th in Phoenix, it'll be four drivers that can win the championship. Of course, if you win any of those three races, you automatically advance to the next segment. Otherwise, the bottom 4 points get dropped. So Harvick, if he has some good runs, might be able to point his way in, but he might very well need a win. He's going to definitely need a win probably by that second set of – in the first six races, he will need a win to continue, basically. Hamlin's got a lot more points. It'll be interesting. By the way, we're at Darlington this weekend, as I mentioned. And then, of course, my home track next week, Richmond on Saturday night, and then Bristol. So two short tracks. We've got Darlington, then two shorts tracks. Andy, in the second set of three, though, Vegas, Talladega, and the Charlotte Roval. So we got a road course in the super speedway. So, I don't want to dwell on Daytona too much. As Rocky said, it's very random, of course, but we do have Talladega in the middle of the playoffs. Joey Logano actually led the most laps last week. And he's been good at Talladega, better at Talladega than Daytona. So he did run a little better than we expected. Chase Elliott led the second most laps. William Byron was a top 5 lap leader. He finished 37th, though. And by the way, Corey Andy, loyal viewer of the show, as you guys know, his top 3, his sleepers he mentioned were Buescher. He also had Preece. Buescher would have been second. Preece would have been fifth. So some good calls there from Corey Andy. And, of course, as Rocky said, we had Bubba Wallace as our rare play on long shot, not play against. And he came in third/second overall. Andy, a lot of chaos as always. Final thoughts on Daytona, and more importantly, the Ricky Stenhouse Jr. unforced error, which probably could go to several different people at Daytona.
Yeah, we laughed last week about we said fade Joey Logano because he has a knack for getting into accidents at the very end, and sure enough, Joey Logano in an accident at the very end. it's tough to pick an unforced error. So I'm going to be a little crazy with a restrictor plate. So this week's unforced error goes, believe it or not, to Bubba Wallace. I'm giving it to Bubba Wallace because he ends up finishing second, and that prevented a record that would never, ever be broken in NASCAR. Steve, if Bubba Wallace hadn't finished second, you realize what would have happened? We would have had the top 3 drivers all with the same first name, Ryan. And that record would never have been broken. We would have had the Ryan Blaney, Ryan Newman, Ryan Preece, 1, 2, 3. Dang it, Bubba. You just can't let us have good things, Bubba. So this week's unforced error award unknowingly goes to Bubba Wallace.
My goodness. And I mean, Buescher did his part. He got disqualified finishing second, so we took Chris out of the mix, right? So, I mean, yeah,
see,
Bubba just
team player, Chris Buescher gets DQ'd.
You threw me like a zigzag there because I thought you were going to say by not trying to wreck everyone in front of them and get into the playoffs, Bubba Wallace got the unforced error because that's the way I would have looked at it. But yeah, I mean, Buescher was second, Wallace was third, Newman was fourth, Preece was fifth, Reddick was sixth before they got the shuffle. All 5 of those guys hadn't won this year. Reddick, of course, points his way in, but really is crazy. Blaney pulled away though; they just couldn't get to him. But I was definitely thinking someone was going to wreck someone to try to make it. So that's Daytona. That's in the rearview mirror. We're going to look forward now to Rocky's home track, Darlington. And this is the Cookout Southern 500, Sunday evening, 6 o'clock Eastern. It'll be the first of the 10 playoff races. And Rocky, it's fitting that we start with you, my man. You know this track better than anybody. You're only about 10 miles away. Very abrasive surface. It's like a 1.33 because of the minnow pond that you told us about earlier this year. And it's an intermediate speedway, but it races different, obviously, because of the wall and the track tire life is very important. So, Rocky, what tracks are you looking at? How are you approaching this? We talked about maybe my track, Richmond, a little more similar than we realized, and I think that did play out in the spring. How are you handicapping this one, and give us a top 3 guy to look at?
Yeah, you got to look at track history here. Darlington is one of a kind. I mean, all the turns are different. Because of the minnow pond, and all these drivers are probably going to end up hitting the wall in turn 4. I've been there many a times, and I've seen them nail that wall, and they keep going. Usually it don't take them out. But yeah, Richmond would be a similar course, maybe some of your intermediate speedways. But like I said, Darlington is its own track. I mean, it's one of a kind for sure. One guy I'm looking at is Denny Hamlin. He's run good this year. He almost beat Larson for the points, for the regular season points championship, and he hasn't won a race. So he has run good throughout the year. He does have 3 wins here, 10 top 5 finishes, 14 top 10s, and 18 races here in Darlington. Average finish is a very good 7.3 at this track. And over the past 3 years here, he has 1 win, 3 top 5s, 4 top 10s, and 6 races. Average finish of 10.5. So I'm expecting Denny Hamlin to run good this weekend.
And by the way, he finished 5th in the spring race, led only 5 laps, but did have the second best driver rating. So he had the second best driver rating in the spring race. We have to point out his teammate, Martin Truex Jr., dominated the May 9th race earlier this year. He led 248 laps. No other driver led more than 10 laps. And Truex led 248, had a 150 driver rating, which is basically perfection. Hamlin was second at 116, Larson at 112. Andy, Truex hasn't been quite as dominant the last couple of months, even though he got some of those early wins in the beginning of the season. But that's a teammate of Hamlin. So obviously Gibbs Racing was very strong this spring. Who's somebody you're looking at, Andy?
I'm going to go with William Byron. I kind of mismatched a bunch of tracks together, tried to take some bank turns and some shorter, some bigger. So I took Michigan, New Hampshire, both Pocono races, and Darlington. And William Byron, 5th best average finish in NASCAR at those tracks this year. And last 2 races at Darlington, he has an average finish of 4.5. Byron's not going to be on the front page of everybody's betting favorites at Darlington, but he should be. I think this is a guy you can get some pretty good head-to-head odds on, maybe even some top 5s, maybe even some wins. But we've seen that we've had some surprise winners and some surprise finishes, and Byron has somehow ended up near the front in a lot of these races. So it wouldn't surprise me if we see a really good finish from William Byron this week.
Yeah, once again, him and teammate Kyle Larson, the two Hendrick racers, finished second, and Byron finished fourth in that spring race that we're talking about. And neither one of them led a single lap. Just incredible. In fact, Larson had the third best driver rating. Byron had the fourth best driver rating, finished fourth, and did not lead a lap, though. That's how dominant Truex was, of course. By the way, Kyle Busch finished third. So you had Hamlin, Truex, and Busch top five, Larson and Byron the other two. So you had all Hendrick Gibbs. So we so far have hit the two teams that were really good in the spring. Rocky, who's somebody else you're looking at?
You just mentioned him, Kyle Larson. He's been dominant this year. He is what Kevin Harvick and Denny Hamlin was last year. He's just been incredible. He hasn't won here in Darlington, but he does have 4 top 5 finishes, 6 top 10s, and 7 career races here. He has the best average finish among all active drivers at 6.0, and only one of those races was with the Hendrick team, if I'm not mistaken. And he's in a much stronger car now. Over the past 3 years, he has 3 top 5 finishes in those 3 races. As you remember, he missed the races last year. His average finish is 2.3 over the past 3 years here, which is the best among all drivers here. So he's looking to tame the Lady in Black here on Sunday for the first time in his career. I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't do that and win this race.
Yeah, and once again, he didn't lead a lap in the last race, but he finished second. He finished second in his previous year. He, of course, missed 2020, but in 2019 he finished second, and he finished third in 2018. He led 284 laps, dominated that race, just didn't get the win. And as you said, Rocky, he's been the best driver this year overall. I mean, and this is a track, despite not winning, that he's been very good at. He's good at tracks like Richmond. And, you know, Andy, once again, Richmond is next week, and that's another reason I mentioned that as a track we might want to compare. And by the way, looking ahead to Richmond, best average finish over the last 3 years, Martin Truex Jr., and that's a guy, as I mentioned, dominated Darlington earlier this year. So I really do think there's more similarities than maybe we realized in the past between Richmond and Darlington, and that's why handicapping this race and watching it this weekend will be so important, because then 6 days later, next Saturday, we are in Richmond. Andy Lang, WagerTalk.com, who is somebody else you're looking at? So far, we've had 1 Gibbs and 2 Hendrick. Not a surprise. Who are you looking for?
This is a guy I don't necessarily, I'm not going to take him to win, but I think if you get a head-to-head matchup with this guy, he's going to be really good. He's going to be good in daily fantasy, seasonal fantasy. It's Aric Almirola. He had trouble this year, finished dead last at Darlington, got involved in an accident, but this is going to shock everybody. Last year in 3 races at Darlington, so not the smallest of sample size, his average finish was 9.3. He finished 7th, 9th, and 12th. This is a tough track to navigate around, but Almirola has had some success here. Top 10 is not out of the deck of cards, and I just think the value is going to be there on him. And, you know, one track we mentioned it that he was a sleeper in. He won that race. That's why he's in the position that he's in. Wouldn't surprise me to see Almirola, if he keeps it out of trouble, to have a really good finish this week.
Yeah, and he's a guy we talked about as a sleeper several times the last few months, because as you mentioned, he had so many bad breaks, and a lot of it was just kind of bad luck the first couple months of the season. And one of them was on May 9th when he finished dead last. He was the only guy really involved in an accident all day in Darlington. But he has been running better recently, and he was very competitive last year, and he has been in the recent months. So /sleeper top 3 candidate there, and definitely a good fantasy play. I think that's the best use of him, Andy, as you mentioned. You get him in that mid-tier price, that $6,000-$7,000 range. You always got to find a couple of drivers. And I think his bad luck is in the rearview mirror, no pun intended. Rocky, who's somebody else you're looking at? Rocky Atkinson, sportsmemo.com. Round out the top 3 here for Darlington for me.
Yes, sir. I got to go with my boy, Kevin Harvick. Y'all knew it was coming.
His boy.
Nah, he's you know, he hasn't run that good this year. We understand that. Here at Darlington, though, he has been very good. 3 wins, 11 top 5s, 16 top 10s, and 27 races here. Average finish of 12.6. And over the past 3 years, he has 2 wins, 5 top 5s, 6 top 10s in those 6 races. Average finish of 3.1. He's starting way down in the playoff race this year. He needs a solid start here to the playoffs this weekend. And we keep mentioning how, you know, he's not running good. And he hasn't been competitive as far as going to win a race. But coming into this race, he is the fourth hottest driver on the circuit over the past 10 races overall. He has an average finish of 11.2. He's only behind Kyle Larson, Kurt Busch, and Ryan Blaney. So he hasn't done terrible. Not the Harvick we know from years past, but I'm looking for Harvick to do something here to start the playoffs this weekend.
Rocky, I'm so glad you gave out that last stat because it's going to keep me from blasting you. Because I was just going to say, we keep waiting for him to do something. And the final straw for me was Michigan a few weeks ago on August 22nd. He won both races in Michigan last year. So obviously he was great there last year. And he wasn't even competitive. He finished 14th. It was not even top 10 in stage 1 or 2. And he had the 12th overall driver rating. So that was kind of it for me. It is interesting that he's been that hot, though, because I don't feel like he has been. So that's an interesting stat. Like Darlington's a great track for him, but I mean, he swept Michigan last year, couldn't even finish top 10 in any stage. So that was it for me. But yeah, numbers do point to Harvick. He's been one of the best here. Hey, look, it's the playoffs. Maybe that'll be a catalyst for him, but I'm going to take a wait and see approach, and we shall see this weekend. And he's also been pretty good at Richmond. So if he has a good run this week, then maybe I start considering him next week. Andy, your thoughts on Harvick and another top 3 guy for you?
Well, my initial thoughts on Harvick, this opening round of tracks did not set up well for him. I think he needs a win at Darlington, Richmond, or Bristol because I look at Las Vegas. He does not have a great history at that track. Then you get Talladega. Who knows what's going to be happening there. And then the Roval. That's, you're talking Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott territory. So, they go to Richmond where he's got a pretty decent history, but he hasn't won since 2013. Bristol, he did get a win there last year, but I'm looking at Richmond and Bristol at maybe his 2 shots to get a win because I don't see it at the Roval. I don't see it at Talladega, Las Vegas. He's going to have to surprise us. So he's on the clock, as they would say. He's going to need to get a win. And as far as my last guy, I got to go with a guy who's just – in the groove. When you win a race like he did last week, you got to look at Ryan Blaney because it seems like the stars are starting to align for him. And he finished 8th here at Darlington last year. He might have the most momentum coming into the playoffs if you think about it. Getting the win at Daytona, and I like guys that seem to have things going for him. We talked about Joey Logano. He's been really unlucky. That's not a guy I want to get behind when I'm coming to the playoffs. I want a guy that his team is clicking. He's peaking at the right time. And Ryan Blaney wouldn't surprise me if he gets another win coming out of Darlington.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. He's the hottest driver coming in. There's no doubt about it. I mean, back-to-backs. And, last year we always talked about how he was as fast, if not faster, at some point in the season. He was the fastest on the intermediate speedways, but he always found ways not to be a top 10. But he's another year older now, another year wiser. So maybe it's starting to click. But we know he's got the horsepower to win on these type of tracks. And Darlington, once again, is a technical intermediate speedway. It's a little different, but it is technically still an intermediate. Rocky, let's get to a long shot. We've been really good on these this year, and we've pointed out some great long shots. And once again, long shots, they might not win, but a top 5, a top 10 is definitely worth a look, often at plus money. As Andy said earlier with Almirola, which is a semi-long shot right there. Mid-tier fantasy plays, we got to have them for those as well for our 6-team lineup. So Rocky Atkinson, sportsmemo.com. Give me a long shot.
I'm going to go with Eric Jones here. He's run good here in his career. He has 1 win, 4 top 5, 6 top 10s, and 7 races here in Darlington. The average finish is 7.0, which is second best only behind Larson. And over the past 3 years here, 1 win, 3 top 5s, 5 top 10s in those 6 races. An average finish of 7.3. I don't think he ran well in the first race this year here, but it's a new team. It's a weaker team, but Jones knows how to get around the track. And I think with that 1 race under their belt here together, could see him getting a top 10 maybe or something this weekend.
Yeah, and Jones is a guy we've mentioned a few times because, obviously he does have good stats. Of course, he was in the 20 car with Gibbs, as you mentioned, Rocky, the 43 car, a weaker team now. But kind of like the road courses, Darlington is one of those semi, not really an intermediate track. So I do think driver experience plays a larger role here than it does where horsepower matters more in the big 1.5 miles. And Jones knows how to get around here. He knows how to maybe save the tires, avoid the wall, as you mentioned, in turn 4. So I think this is a week where he could be a bit of a sleeper. Andy Lang, wagertalk.com. You gave us Almirola. You have another sleeper? Or do you want to get to a play against? What you looking at?
I'll give you guys a sleeper. These are to be used in, maybe some dark horses in some seasonal fantasy leagues. These are the leagues that you play like the entire season. You don't just play half of it, and then I don't know, the league owner kind of disappears, and then you only get half a year out of it. These are for the leagues that go year round, and I'm going to go with a guy who has been driving a rocket ship. Steve, you know what I'm talking about.
I'm hunting them down as we
yes.
speak. Don't you worry. I've got people on it. Pissed.
Inside joke. Sorry about that.
It's going to be a public joke pretty soon.
Rocky's
It'll be
really
a public
upset.
joke if he doesn't show his head in the next week. Hope you watch
The inside joke is
HE.
the three of us got completely ripped off on a fantasy league. We fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. Entry dues gone. All right. Anyway, but if I was still participating in this league, I would look at Austin Dillon because, as he said, he has been driving a rocket ship. This is a guy that might be really motivated to show he deserves to be in the playoffs. And to be honest, he probably did deserve to be in. He was better than Tyler Reddick over the last 3 races. 2 unfortunate wrecks. I mean, the one that he got into with Brad Keselowski 2 weeks ago has just got to be – he's got to be so mad about that. And 3 races here, 2020, he averaged an 11th place finish. So he knows how to get around this track. And I think he's going to feel a little scorned, and he's going to want to show that he deserves to be in the playoffs because, quite frankly, he does. I would not be surprised to see him mix it up with the guys in the playoffs this week.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Austin Dillon because that's a guy I was going to ask you all about. Reddick, Dillon, last in, last out. Like, how do you handicap these guys? I think you're right. Dillon has to have a chip on his shoulder. He has nothing to lose at this point. And early nominee for Unforced Error of the Year has to be what happened, although it was a little bit of Keselowski's fault. So that's why I can't, Keselowski didn't give him any room to come back up when they wrecked. By the way, harking back to the Richmond comparison, Austin Dillon is a guy that's gotten tremendously better at Richmond in recent years. He said the last 2 or 3 years he's really started to figure out, so we'll see if that transfers to Darlington. But he's a hit-or-miss guy, so that's the definition of a long shot. He could definitely have a good weekend. Rocky, before we get to the best bet for the show, a free play for the show, give me a sleeper. We gave you a sleeper. Give me a play against. These guys are just as good as play-on guys because in head-to-head matchups, we can play against these guys. You also might want to leave them off your fantasy team in case you're looking at them. Who's a play-against guy for you, Rocky, at Darlington?
I'm going to play against Michael McDowell. He has no wins, no top 5s, no top 10s, and 12 races here in Darlington. Average finish 28.3 at this track. His driver rating here in Darlington the past 3 years is a terrible 53.7. With him being in the playoffs, we could find some value playing against him this weekend. He should be in a couple of head-to-head matchups, and we'll be looking at when the lines come out to see if there's any value there.
Yeah, I like where you're going with that. I was going to say, normally, say play against Michael McDowell wouldn't be a very bold prediction, but he's coming off one of his best tracks, the track that got him into the playoffs when he won the Daytona 500. He is in the playoffs, as you said, and these guys over the years, as you know, Andy, these guys that sneak into the playoffs, they've never done anything. They're always gone after the first round for the most part. So I would expect McDowell to have a few bad races coming up. He is good on the road courses, but I'm not sure he's going to be alive still for that 6th race in the Charlotte Roval or the 5th race at Talladega. But if he can get by this first 3, he has a couple good tracks for him. So we'll see. But definitely, I agree, a play against this week at Darlington. Andy Lang, WagerTalk.com. Who's a play against guy for you?
I just refuse to lose any more money betting on Joey Logano. Another wreck in the last few laps. I mean, his average finish the last 5 races is 23.4, despite the fact his driver rating is 11th. So he's been driving good, and he just isn't getting the finishes, and sometimes it's just contagious. As unlucky as Joey Logano has been, Ryan Blaney seems to be the opposite end of that spectrum. And in this sport, I like to ride the hot hand and fade the cold hand. And poor Joey Logano, it doesn't seem to be any fault of his own. We had the exploding ramps at at the Indianapolis track, and then just a last-second wrap at a restrictor plate. So I just can't put any money behind Joey Logano until he shakes the unlucky streak.
Yeah, and right now, looking at some of the early advanced matchups that are available, I'm seeing Byron matched up against Logano. So it's 2 guys we've talked about here on the show, and also seeing Blaney against Kurt Busch. And by the way, it was just announced this week, Kurt Busch will be the second team now for Hamlin and Jordan's team next year. He'll be in the 45 car, so it'll be interesting to see how competitive he is. And that'll tell us a lot about Bubba Wallace, because if Busch runs like he's run this year, which has been very good, that'll tell us all we need to know about Wallace, because you can't blame the equipment or the team anymore at that point. Rocky Atkinson, sportsmemo.com. Let's close out the show with a couple free plays for the viewers. Of course, Rocky and Andy will both have their official NASCAR best bets this Sunday on the website, sportsmemo.com for Rocky, wagertalk.com for Andy. And the matchups will be up Sunday morning. The race goes at 6 Eastern Sunday evening, so you have plenty of time to lock in and make some money this Labor Day weekend. Once again, Rocky Atkinson, sportsmemo.com, Andy Lang, wagertalk.com. And Rocky, give them a little sample here. I know the numbers aren't quite out yet, but what's a free head-to-head here for the show that you're looking at?
Yeah, I'm looking at Kyle Larson to finish ahead of Martin Truex Jr. This is more of a play-on situation for me. I know Truex run good here in the first race this year. Larson's hungry for a win here. He wants to win here. I've already mentioned his career numbers here, 6 top 10s and 7 career races here. Best finish among all drivers at 6.0. Last 3 years, average finish of 2.3 for Larson. Truex does have 2 wins here, 3 top 5s, 9 top 10s, and 18 races here. Average finish is solid, 11.2. But I'm going with a better driver here this year, which is Kyle Larson. Like I said, I feel like he's going to be hungry for that win, for his first win here in Darlington. Looking at Larson to finish ahead of Truex.
It really is amazing all the years I followed NASCAR that when someone dominates like they did on May 9th, when he led basically every lap, but it's just a handful, it doesn't usually carry over to the second race. I don't think I've ever seen it carry over in that kind of form again. So Truex really is due to regress. He's been much weaker the last few months. He hasn't been as dominant as he was early in the season. And we pointed out earlier in the show, of course, why Larson is a great pick this week all around. He finished second, and it was a strong car. And by the way, right now I'm seeing Larson about $1.50, minus 150. That's a readily available matchup at all the books. Kyle Larson over Martin Truex Jr. for Rocky Atkinson, sportsmemo.com. Follow Rocky also on Twitter at Rocketman Sports. He gives out a lot of free NASCAR information at Rocketman Sports. Andy Lang closes out here, wagertalk.com, with a free play for the show. You are the prop master, football, baseball, basketball, and NASCAR as well. And I think top 10s are technically considered a prop, if I'm not mistaken.
Ryan Blaney at even money to finish top 10 is just incredible value. That was the first thing that jumped off the page. Why overthink it? He's in the playoffs easily, so automatically you got to like those guys to finish top 10. Last 5 races, he has the highest average finish in NASCAR with an average finish of 4.6, and that includes a multitude of different tracks, peaking at the right time. And at Darlington earlier this year, he finished 8th, and he's starting up front. So you even get that small advantage. So, yeah, Ryan Blaney top 10 at even money is an easy play for me.
Yeah, that's insane. I can't believe that's even money. We just talked about him earlier as being the hottest driver on the circuit. And so, and that's not to win. That's not top 5. That's top 10. So I like it. Ryan Blaney top 10 for Andy. And once again, Larson over Truex for Rocky. Hey, quick reminder, if you missed out last week, you can still get $100 off a full year motorsports subscription. Andy does both Formula One and NASCAR. Rocky does NASCAR as well at Sports Memo. Race 100. Race 100. If you buy a 1-year package for motorsports, make sure you use promo code Race 100, because that's a $100 bill right back in your pocket. $100 discount for either Andy or Rocky, or use them both. Race 100, sportsmemo.com for Rocky, wagertalk.com for Andy Lang. I'm Steve Merrill. I'm also on wagertalk.com. College football is here. Be sure to check out videos this week. I'm going to have a weekend college football video. NFL starts next week. And don't forget also to subscribe to Wager Talk TV. Please help us out here. If you like the free content we just gave you, if you like the free selections, keep it going by being a subscriber. It takes 2 seconds to click subscribe, click the like button, and then comment below. We love our comments. Let me know who your sleepers are and your top 3 for this weekend at Darlington. Subscribe, like, and comment below, and check back next Friday evening for more Life in the Fast Lane right here on Wager Talk TV. Best of luck this weekend.